Weston Engineering wasn't just another mechanical firm. It was a name built on trust, precision, and generations of hard-earned expertise. Established over 4 decades ago in Toronto by Henry Weston, the company had grown from a modest workshop into a respected leader in industrial engineering. Its reputation was built on more than just technical skill. It was about integrity, about delivering work that didn't just meet expectations but exceeded them. Whether it was designing complex manufacturing systems or fine-tuning intricate machinery, Weston Engineering stood for quality. At the heart of this legacy was David Weston, Henry's younger brother. A seasoned engineer with over 30 years of experience, David had dedicated his life to the company. He wasn't just another employee. He was the backbone of Weston Engineering, the one people turned to when problems needed solving. His hands had fine-tuned countless machines, and his knowledge, gained from years on the shop floor, couldn't be taught in a classroom. More importantly, he understood that running a successful business wasn't just about efficiency or cutting-edge technology. It was about people. He knew the names of every technician, listened to their concerns, and ensured that every project was completed with the same level of care his brother had instilled from the beginning. But times were changing. When Henry stepped down, the company leadership passed to his son, Ethan Weston. Young, ambitious, and freshly armed with an MBA from a prestigious business school, Ethan saw things differently. To him, Weston Engineering wasn't about legacy, it was about numbers. Growth, expansion, efficiency. These were the metrics he cared about. He admired tech-driven firms that maximized output with minimal costs, and in his mind, the company needed to evolve or be left behind. From his sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the shop floor, Ethan saw inefficiencies everywhere. The older employees, including his own uncle, were costly assets, high salaries, slow adaptation to new processes, and, in his eyes, resistance to change. He believed that with the right automation, younger, more adaptable workers, and aggressive cost-cutting, Weston Engineering could scale to new heights. It wasn't that he disrespected the past, but to him, tradition was just another word for stagnation. David, of course, disagreed. He had watched too many companies crumble under the weight of their own short-sighted decisions. He had seen what happened when experience was undervalued, when quality was sacrificed for speed. He tried to warn Ethan, to remind him that trust in the industry was everything, that once a company lost its reputation, no amount of money could buy it back. But Ethan wouldn't listen. Within months, the changes came fast and hard. Older employees were let go, replaced by younger, cheaper hires. Processes were streamlined, inspections were cut short, and suddenly, Weston Engineering wasn't the company it used to be. And then, one day, David Weston received the email. Effective immediately, his position was no longer required. A lifetime of dedication erased in a single corporate decision. As he packed up his things, walking past the machines he had spent decades perfecting, David couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go very, very wrong. David hadn't expected a grand farewell, but he had expected better than this. No conversation, no warning, just an email from HR, a severance package shoved across the desk, and a cold, clipped response when he asked why. It's just business. Just business. The words echoed in his head as he packed up 3 decades of his life into a single cardboard box. The photos of projects he had poured his soul into. The framed certificate his brother had given him for their first $1 million contract. The old stopwatch he used to time machine calibrations, still marked with oil from long nights on the floor. All of it meaningless now. As he stepped outside for the last time, the December air bit at his face. His breath came out in harsh clouds, but he barely felt the cold. From across the lot, through the glass walls of the main office, he saw Ethan, his own nephew, sitting at his father's old desk, laughing at something on his phone. David clenched his jaw, forcing himself to turn away. Weston Engineering was no longer his problem, or so he thought. At first, it was just a trickle, former colleagues reaching out, venting their frustrations. Then it became a flood. David, something's wrong. The new guys don't know what they're doing. They're cutting corners, real bad ones. He ignored them at first, let Ethan run the company however he wanted. But then Jack Reynolds called. Jack wasn't the type to panic. He'd been at Weston Engineering almost as long as David, a man who had spent his life shaping steel and never flinched. even when a machine backfired and nearly took his arm. But today his voice was tight, edged with something David had never heard before: fear. "Meet me now." David drove straight to a small coffee shop outside the industrial district. Jack was already there, 2 cups of black coffee sitting between them. His hands were rough, calloused, but they were shaking. He didn't waste time on small talk. Instead, he slid his phone across the table. "Look at this." David picked it up. Blueprints, schematics, incomplete quality reports. His stomach turned as he read. "They rushed the turbine project in Mississauga," Jack muttered, voice low. "Skipped the final stress test." David's grip tightened. "That's not all." Jack exhaled sharply. "They're using cheap alloys. You know the kind, the ones that crack under high pressure." David's pulse pounded in his ears. He had fought against those cost-cutting measures for years. He had warned Ethan that shaving dollars off material costs would backfire. Now it wasn't just a bad business move, it was a death trap. Jack's voice was grim. "If that turbine blows..." David didn't need him to finish. He already knew. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about people's lives. He sat back, exhaling slowly, fingers tapping against the table. Every instinct told him to walk away. It wasn't his fight. Ethan had made his bed, let him lie in it. But Weston Engineering wasn't just another company. It was his brother's legacy. His legacy. And he wasn't about to let Ethan burn it to the ground. David pushed the phone back to Jack and stood. His decision was already made. "I need to talk to Ethan." David drove straight to Weston Engineering, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a deep, simmering anger. This wasn't just negligence. This was reckless, dangerous, and worst of all, avoidable. When he pulled into the parking lot, he barely recognized the place. The yard, once a model of efficiency, was cluttered with half-assembled equipment and discarded parts. Trucks sat idle, their deliveries delayed. This wasn't the company his brother had built. This was chaos. Inside, the tension was palpable. Employees moved through the halls with their heads down, hushed conversations stopping abruptly as David passed. He wasn't supposed to be here, but he was done staying away. He stormed into Ethan's office without knocking. His nephew looked up, surprised but not alarmed. Dressed in a designer suit, leaning back in their family's old leather chair, he looked every bit the confident executive. "David," Ethan said smoothly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" David slammed the folder onto the desk. Blueprints, safety reports, cost-cutting memos, evidence of a disaster in the making. "What the hell is this?" David demanded. Ethan sighed, barely glancing at the documents. "It's called efficiency, Uncle David. Something you never understood." David's jaw clenched. "You skipped the final stress test on the Mississauga turbine. Do you even understand what that means?" Ethan scoffed. "The tests are outdated. We ran simulations. It'll hold." "No, it won't." David leaned forward, voice dangerously low. "You're gambling with people's lives. If that turbine fails, you're not just looking at a recall. You're looking at lawsuits, criminal charges, blood on your hands." For the first time, Ethan hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his face before he masked it with arrogance. "That's not going to happen," he said, shaking his head. "The numbers." David slammed his fist on the desk. "Screw the numbers. Have you ever been on the floor? Have you ever heard the way a bad weld creaks under pressure? Have you ever seen a faulty turbine explode?" His voice was raw, desperate. "Because I have, Ethan. And I promise you, you do not want that on your conscience." Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Look, Uncle, I get it. You're old school. But things change. You were let go for a reason. I'm running the company now." David stared at him, his blood running cold. Ethan wasn't going to listen. He was too deep in his own ego to see the disaster ahead. The door burst open. A frantic engineer, sweat beading at his temple, rushed inside. "We have a problem," he panted. "The Mississauga turbine. There's been a failure." Silence. David felt the world tilt. "What kind of failure?" Ethan asked, his voice no longer so confident. The engineer swallowed hard. "Structural. A full rupture." David didn't wait to hear more. He turned on his heel and ran. Ethan's heart pounded as he pulled into the industrial lot of Northfield Precision, Weston Engineering's fiercest competitor. The towering steel-framed building loomed ahead, its massive bay doors open, revealing the hum of machinery and the rhythmic clang of metal against metal. It was a shop built on precision, experience, everything Weston Engineering used to stand for before he tore it apart. Stepping out of his car, Ethan hesitated. He didn't belong here. Just months ago, he had been the head of a thriving company, making decisions from a sleek glass office. Now, he was walking into enemy territory, forced to swallow his pride. But pride wouldn't save Weston. Pride wouldn't undo the disaster he had caused. Inside, the air smelled of oil and hot steel, a scent Ethan had once found suffocating but now carried a strange comfort. It reminded him of his father, of the long hours spent watching the old crew work, of David standing at the center of it all like an immovable pillar. And then, there he was. David Weston stood at one of the CNC machines, sleeves rolled up, safety goggles perched on his forehead. He looked different from the last time Ethan had seen him. Not just older, but sharper, more alive. He wasn't behind a desk. He was in his element. For a brief moment, Ethan considered turning around. But before he could, David glanced up, and their eyes met. Silence. The workers nearby exchanged looks, recognizing the tension thick in the air. A few murmured, some even smirked. The prodigal CEO had returned, not to reclaim his throne, but to ask for help. David set down his tools and wiped his hands on a rag before walking toward him. His expression was unreadable. "You've got some nerve showing up here." Ethan swallowed hard. "I need to talk." David crossed his arms. "About what?" "How you drove the company into the ground. How you ignored every warning." His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Ethan clenched his jaw. "I made mistakes." David let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's putting it lightly." The words stung, but Ethan forced himself to push forward. He wasn't here to argue. He wasn't here to defend himself. He was here because he had no other choice. "I need your help," he admitted, the words heavy, foreign on his tongue. David raised an eyebrow. "My help?" Ethan exhaled sharply, frustration flickering in his chest, not at David, but at himself. Weston Engineering is falling apart. The turbine failure was just the start. We're bleeding clients. We're losing contracts, and I don't know how to fix it. His voice faltered. "But you do." David studied him for a long moment. Then, to Ethan's surprise, his uncle sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. There was no triumph in his eyes, no gloating, only exhaustion. "Tell me everything," David said finally. And for the first time in months, Ethan felt something other than panic. Hope. The next morning, just as the sun began to rise over the city skyline, Ethan pulled into the parking lot of Weston Engineering. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind replaying the conversation from the night before. David had agreed to return, but on his terms. No negotiations, no compromises. If Ethan wanted to save the company, he would have to let David do what he did best. Ethan exhaled and stepped out of his car, the crisp morning air doing little to steady his nerves. Would the employees even accept David back? After all, Ethan had been the one to force him out. Now, he was bringing him back as their savior. The moment Ethan walked inside, he knew word had already spread. Clusters of workers stood near their stations, whispering, exchanging skeptical glances. Some looked hopeful, others wary. Then, a hush fell over the floor as the heavy sound of steel-toed boots echoed through the corridor. David Weston had returned. He walked in with the quiet authority of a man who had never truly left, his eyes sweeping across the shop floor, taking in the mess Ethan had created. Machines in disrepair, workstations cluttered, employees who once took pride in their craft now moving through the motions, barely holding things together. David didn't say a word at first. Instead, he strode to the nearest lathe, ran his fingers across the dust-covered surface, and let out a long breath. Then, in a voice that carried across the room, he said, "This isn't Weston Engineering." Silence. Ethan swallowed hard as his uncle turned toward the crowd. "I built this place with your fathers, your uncles, your mentors. We built it on precision, on trust, not on cutting corners." He turned to a younger machinist, a kid barely in his 20s. "How often do you check your tolerances?" The machinist hesitated. "Every few parts, I guess." David shook his head. "Not good enough. We used to check after every pass, because that's what made us better than the rest." A voice came from the back. Luis, one of the veteran machinists who had walked out months ago. "You think you can fix this mess?" His tone was sharp, but there was something else in it, too. Hope. David met his gaze. "I don't think." I know. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some looked convinced, others skeptical, but no one dismissed him outright. David turned to Ethan. You want Weston Engineering to survive? Then you stay out of my way. Ethan nodded. Done. David glanced back at the team. First order of business. If you walked away from this company because of what it became, I want you back. All of you. If you stayed and fought through this mess, you'll be rewarded. A pause. Then Louis stepped forward, staring hard at David, before finally extending his hand. Then let's get to work. And just like that, Weston Engineering had a second chance. The first few weeks were brutal. David had expected resistance, but not the sheer level of damage he had to undo. Machines were still out of alignment, processes were sloppy, and worst of all, the spirit of the workforce was shattered. Years of experience had been dismissed, craftsmanship reduced to mere efficiency metrics, and trust, the foundation of Weston Engineering, was gone. But David had never been one to back down from a fight. His first move was bringing back the old crew. Luis returned, followed by other veterans who had once walked out in disgust. Their return sent a shockwave through the company. Younger machinists, who had only known Ethan's style of leadership, suddenly found themselves working under men who had built this place from the ground up. It was a clash of generations, but David made one thing clear. There would be no us versus them. This isn't about old ways versus new, he told them one morning. This is about doing things the right way. The shop floor transformed into a battlefield of discipline and precision. Tools were recalibrated, old processes reinstated, and most importantly, quality control was restored. No more rush jobs. No more half measures. If a part wasn't up to Weston standards, it didn't leave the shop. At first, customers were hesitant to return. The damage to the company's reputation ran deep. But then, something changed. A small aerospace contractor, one who had sworn never to work with Weston again, agreed to place a trial order. It was a risky move, one that could make or break the company's future. The entire shop held its breath as the first batch of parts was machined, inspected, and shipped out. Then, 3 days later, the contractor called. Ethan was in his office when the phone rang. He braced himself for more bad news. Instead, the voice on the other end was stunned. These are the best parts we've gotten in years, the contractor admitted. If this is what Weston Engineering is now, then we're back in. That moment changed everything. Word spread quickly. Other former clients hesitated at first, but eventually returned, each one testing Weston Engineering to see if the promises held up. And every time, the team delivered. The turning point came when an international firm placed its first major order in months. A job that required not just precision, but expertise, the kind that couldn't be learned in a classroom or written into a process manual. David, standing over a machine late one night, turned to Luis. Think we still got it? Luis chuckled, tightening a bolt. We never lost it. By the end of the quarter, Weston Engineering wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Employees who had once dreaded walking through the doors now took pride in their work again. Customers who had left in frustration now trusted Weston's name once more. And as Ethan stood in the middle of the bustling shop floor one evening, watching his uncle lead the team with the same fire he had decades ago, he realized something. David hadn't just saved Weston Engineering. He had rebuilt its soul. The message and the lesson. Weston Engineering's revival wasn't just a business turnaround. It was a testament to a truth too many had forgotten. Experience, craftsmanship, and trust are not relics of the past. They are the backbone of success, the foundation of any lasting legacy. Ethan had learned that lesson the hard way. One evening, long after the last machine had gone silent and the final reports had been filed, he stood in the office, his father's old office, staring at the framed photos on the wall. Pictures of his grandfather shaking hands with employees, of his father inspecting a finished part with quiet pride, of David standing next to the first CNC machine Weston had ever purchased. They had built this company not on spreadsheets and efficiency quotas, but on trust, expertise, and an unyielding commitment to quality. And Ethan had nearly destroyed it. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I almost lost everything, he murmured. David, standing in the doorway, folded his arms. No, he said simply. You almost forgot what mattered. Ethan turned to him, waiting. David stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. A business is more than numbers. It's more than quarterly earnings and market projections. It's about people. The ones who put in the hours, who pass down their knowledge, who make sure that when a customer sees your name on a part, they don't just trust it, they depend on it. Ethan swallowed hard. I thought innovation meant moving forward at any cost. David gave a small, knowing smile. Innovation without wisdom is just recklessness. He gestured toward the shop floor, where the last mechanics were cleaning up. That's what you almost lost. And that's what we got back. It wasn't just Weston Engineering that had been rebuilt, it was Ethan himself. In the weeks that followed, he took a different role in the company, not as a distant executive dictating from an office, but as a leader willing to listen. He spent time on the floor, learning from the veterans, understanding the subtle details of the craft, and earning back the trust he had shattered. The company's revival became a story that rippled through the industry. Customers, suppliers, and even competitors took notice. Weston Engineering wasn't just another machine shop trying to stay afloat. It was a place that proved something vital. Experience is not replaceable. In today's fast-moving world, too many businesses chase quick profits, cutting corners and replacing seasoned workers with algorithms and automation. But Weston Engineering's journey was a reminder that true craftsmanship isn't just about efficiency. It's about expertise, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to doing things right. For anyone watching from the outside, the message was clear. Whether you're a business owner, a tradesperson, or a professional in any field, your experience carries a value that no spreadsheet can quantify. Because at the end of the day, legacies aren't built on cost-cutting and shortcuts. They're built on trust. And trust, once broken, is damn hard to get back.